I work for TIBCO as technical lead and technology evangelist, and therefore I work in the middleware sector, and we hear these topics from customers all the time, like microservices and containers and cloud-native architectures, and therefore this is the perfect topic for me because I discuss these topics with my customers and with prospects every day and every week. And it's very relevant to everybody, not just in the middleware sector. So I think it's a hot topic and really nice to talk about this. Yeah, let's first talk about what is microservice. So that's really a key point. So from my perspective, this is really an architectural style. So it's important that microservice is not just about technologies. So many people talk just about REST and HTTP, but it's really more. So with mobile and Internet of Things and so on, we see a lot of messaging and so on. And all of that is also important for microservices. And it's an architectural style, so it's really a little bit comparable to the SOA, service-oriented architecture, which we talked about the last 5 to 10 years. And in the end, it has a lot of the same ideas, but right now, the tooling and the IT is ready to implement these ideas which we had 5 to 10 years ago. So why do we implement microservice today in almost any industry? You want to be flexible and you want to adapt changes and implement new features quickly and easily. And that was also the idea of the service-oriented architecture a few years ago, but it was not possible at that time because the tooling was not ready. There was no continuous integration, DevOps, and these kind of things which are possible today and then supported by frameworks and products. And therefore, really, what is a microservice? In the end, you develop every service by itself, and then you deploy and scale and monitor every service by itself. It can be any technology, and it's independent of each other. And therefore, you have the huge benefit of microservices that you can later replace one microservice with a new version or a new completely different implementation. And that's a key difference to the service-oriented architecture in the past. And that's basically why we see microservices everywhere, because any industry and enterprise needs to implement changes quickly, to react to market changes and so on. And that's basically why we see microservices everywhere. Yes, absolutely. So this is really very, very complementary because for microservices, you need to be flexible. And as I mentioned, this was not possible 10 years ago because the technologies and products were not ready for that. You usually used bare metal and hardware or virtual machines to deploy your applications on that. And that's really heavyweight because the virtual machine is really a heavyweight thing, which has an operating system and it has many, many gigabytes of storage and so on. And it's not easy to develop independent services and scale them independently with a VM or bare metal. And therefore, we see more and more the idea of containers. And containers, basically, that's nothing new. So Unix, for example, the operating system leverages the container concept for 10 or years or longer. But now it's really getting to the mainstream for application developers. And here, the key idea behind that, and that's very important, is really that now with containers, you can build, ship, and run your services everywhere with the same container. So you develop it once and test it on your laptop, and then you deploy the same application to a test environment and then later to a production environment. You do not have to change or recompile the application. And that's a key difference which you can leverage containers for. So for containers, it's important that's the concept behind that, and there is specific technologies behind. The most momentum is behind Docker, definitely, but everybody should be aware that there are more of these technologies. For example, there is Rocket by CoreOS, or some cloud platforms like the open source Cloud Foundry is using Garden and Varden for that. So Docker definitely has the most momentum in the container space and might get the de facto standard in some years, but there's more of that. But the key is really you use containers to build, ship, and run your applications or services or microservices, no matter how you call that, but you ship that everywhere in the same package, in the same container. And that's why we see microservices and container usually together. Yeah, that's the next good point, because many people just talk about microservices and containers. And that's really just one part of being cloud native. So the first important thing here is to discuss what means cloud native, because we read that a lot in different articles and blog posts and hear that on conferences. So let's define what that means. Let's first begin with what is cloud ready, because that's what many products and vendors do, but it's completely different. So cloud ready means that you use your existing products or applications which you developed and put them in the cloud. This can be, for example, a cloud provider like Amazon or Microsoft Azure or the Google Cloud Platform, or it can be a private cloud like OpenStack, for example. But that's not really cloud native. That is really just pushing your applications to the cloud. And that's just one part, of course. Then you can scale by yourself how much you need. But you have to do a lot of efforts around that to implement things like elasticity, to do automatic scaling and monitoring all of that, because some of these services will crash in the cloud and you have to redeploy to other instances then. And therefore, being cloud ready is just the first part. But to be really cloud native, you need to support many more characteristics. To give you some examples, you really need elastic scalability automatically, so that you do not have to configure it by yourself. If one node goes down, automatically the application has deployed to another one and restarted. You have to think about things like server-side and client-side load balancing. You have to think about distributed configuration management and cluster management, because in addition to, you do not just develop the monoliths anymore, the big applications, but it's really about the small microservices. You have a lot of them and scale them a lot. So you have a lot of new problems that you have to solve, a lot of new complexity. And therefore, cloud native really means when you solve all this complexity. And that's really the key part behind the new components which you have to think about cloud native. And therefore, really, the idea behind that, why do you want to do that? The first point from business perspective is you want to do a higher utilization. You want to use more of the CPU which you pay for on Amazon or Microsoft, right? And you want to reduce your costs with that. So that's the first benefit. But besides that, it's really about being agile and flexible, so that you can faster upgrade to a new version of a microservice, to also roll back if the microservice is not working all right. And so with the cloud native architecture and all these components, you can really take a look at your business problems and be more innovative. And that's the key goal of all customers and enterprises I see, no matter if it's a small one or the really big ones. That's the main challenge, and that's why most enterprises are going to microservices, to containers, and the cloud native architecture. Yeah, that's also a good point, because the good and also the bad news is there's a lot of different options you have. So it's an unbelievably big market and it's growing day by day, I would say. In the end, you have really two different options to go cloud native. The first option is really you use one solution which has all these building blocks I talked about in one package. That's about the distributed configuration management, load balancing, cluster management, scheduling, all these things, all building blocks in one solution. That's the one which is easy to start, because you can also use it in the cloud like Amazon or like Microsoft, and you have all at once and can leverage that and really focus on your applications. There's things like, of course, we talk a lot about Docker and containers, and there you see frameworks around that like Kubernetes, which is getting more and more traction. It's a framework which was open sourced by Google and is also leveraged by many other vendors in the meantime, like Red Hat with OpenShift, or for example IBM, and many other vendors are using it. You can also use a direct cloud solution like Amazon with AWS, a container system with the registry and so on. So there's a lot of different products for that you can use. On the other side, if you're building really a custom solution, you can just think about some frameworks which you want to add to your solution. That might make sense if you do not want to use the complete cloud native features. Sometimes you only need parts of that, right? Because cloud native means a lot of different things. And if you, for example, need just a few of them, like client and server load balancing, then just pick a framework for that. And there's, again, a lot on the market. The most well-known ones are the ones from Netflix, which is really the origin of microservices, I would say. It's a tech giant, and they use it for years. And they also published a lot of these frameworks they implemented as open source. And many others can simply download them and leverage them. There's also things like Spring Cloud, which again combines these open source Netflix frameworks with their own Spring frameworks, and you can combine that again. But here again, there's so much different things. The key to differ is either you use a complete platform which has all the building blocks, or you use the frameworks and build something by yourself. So you have to take a look at both and decide what's the right one for you. Yeah, there is really a huge relation between that. I mean, I work for a middleware vendor, and I also see that at conferences from all the other vendors, they really take a look at that because it's so important. So let's first maybe define what is middleware. So middleware is really the glue code between different systems. This is things like integration, where you connect the different applications and systems. This is getting more and more important with mobile, with Internet of Things, and all the different applications you have to connect. All enterprises use other cloud services like CRM and so on. So you have to integrate more and more in the future. It's not getting less, it's really getting more. Another example for middleware is event processing, where you correlate the events of different microservices or applications in real time to get new insights, for example, for predictive analytics or so. Or even things like business process management, where human interaction is integrated. All of these middleware solutions have in common that they have the same requirements like custom applications where you build microservices today. So you need to be flexible and agile. As I said, you need to integrate more and more applications and every day or week. And so you have to be agile. And here you also have to leverage microservices on containers and the cloud native architecture to be that agile. And therefore, for middleware, we have the same requirements as for custom applications. And therefore, many vendors already implemented some kind of solution for that. Again, it's a real key difference if you are just cloud ready and you deploy your existing middleware to the cloud, or you have really cloud native middleware. And I want to highlight this on one example, which is the integration part, which is really getting so relevant in every company, especially due to IoT, mobile, cloud, and so on. For integration, many, especially from the SOA days, know the Enterprise Service Bus, which was the core integration platform. And also for this, which really integrates the core services, mission-critical systems for banks, for retailers, for airlines. All of them use an ESB in the middle to integrate all the internal and external application. This ESB also has to get cloud native in the meantime, because you have here the same challenge to be flexible as I mentioned. So in the meantime, the ESB middleware is also cloud native. It leverages containers, it leverages microservices that you build small integrations and can change them quickly and integrate new systems. That's the core integration systems, which you typically still deploy in a private cloud or sometimes in the public cloud. That doesn't matter. On the other side, you have something, what I like to call edge services. That's not about the mission-critical systems in the middle of the data center of the companies, but that's really more for the line of business. In the meantime, they also have to integrate different applications and services more and more. And therefore, for the edge in the line of business, you have different kind of middleware. These are not the integration specialists which can develop very complex transformations. So for the edge, you usually have middleware which offers a web UI. You do not have a typical IDE, but you really have a web UI where you configure instead of code some integrations. And for that, and I here also refer to the analysts like Gartner and Forrester, you have two different kinds of applications. The first one is the iPaaS, which is the integration platform as a service. And that's the one for still a technical expert who has to do things like integrating different systems, do some coding or transformations, configure security things or throttling or caching. And that's what's called iPaaS. And many vendors offer a solution for that. But really that's already deployed and running in the cloud. That's really, therefore, it's very easy to use and agile, so that the line of business can do that without doing formal processes through all the big companies. And the second part is what's called by the analysts ISaaS, so integration software as a service. And there you really do not care much about what's running under the hood. It's really for the business user, also called the citizen integrator, who is doing some very simple integrations. For example, if a business user has to map some information from a big Excel or CSV file to Salesforce CRM every day or every week, with this kind of middleware, he can configure that once and do it automatically every week. And it's very easy to use in a web UI and can be configured there. And so this is just the overview, and to summarize here, for middleware, microservices, containers, and the cloud-native architecture are as relevant as for any other part of the software development industry. And therefore, many vendors are already going this way because the customers are asking for it. And that's good news, because now everybody can innovate and take care of the business problems instead of taking a look at just the infrastructure and technology behind it.